Order and document the time at 6:30. This is 2 months in a row. We haven't started at 6:34, so that's a good thing. If you would stand and join me for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you very much. And Tori, if you would be so kind as to guide us in a quick mindfulness.
You bet.
Appreciate
All right.
that.
Everybody find a nice comfortable seat, feet on the ground. And we're just going to take some breaths. Breathing in and breathing out. Just arrive here. One deep breath in. Out. Another one in. And out. We're just going to settle in right into our seats. We take this time to settle from where we've come from to remind ourselves of where we are right now. For yourself, breathe in. And out. Breathing in. And out. And on the occasion of it being June, our last school board meeting for the school year, we send out some kind wishes to our graduates who will be on Saturday going out into the world. May they all find value and worth within themselves to go out and live a happy, successful, and productive life. Breathe in one more time and out, and you will be ready for governing.
Thank you very much. All right. And so on the agenda tonight, we had a couple of recognitions. One was with David Abdu from Waterworks for all the work that he's done this year. We're going to do the Golden Apple. He was unavailable this evening, so we're going to push that actually to September, because I would really love to have him in here to say thank you in person. The second one, we have our senior student rep this year moving on. I understand you're going to college from here, and so we wish you all of the best, obviously, and that comes from all of us. But I did want to make a special note to say thank you for getting involved. As we as a board have wrestled with our own identity of what it is we're doing here, why are we here. Part of our role is to make sure that we touch the community, and we're doing and getting out of the school district a value for what they put in. What we really need to have is we need to have our students helping us from the inside out. It's always it's a different twist. We're asking an awful lot of you guys. We realize that. I think we have still a long ways to go, but we've made an awful lot of progress in understanding getting the student voice to the table is okay, but actually hearing your voices and hearing what it is that you need from us, what it is we can do for you, obviously within reason, but getting that deeper amount of voice, and we appreciate you stepping up and taking on that challenge, because it isn't easy, and we appreciate it. So, thank you very much for your service. Anybody else want to
Thank you, Alex.
add?
Yeah. Thank you for your time and your input. It's really made a difference.
The education, and become legendary.
Yep.
Then come back and tell us about it.
Yes.
Don't take no for an answer. And so as a token, a small token of our appreciation, I just wanted to say thank you for the work that you've done, for being here. Thank you, appreciate it.
Can you just stand around?
Photo op, photo op.
Everything's got to end up on the internet.
There's not a picture on it, it didn't happen.
It's not on Facebook or Instagram, Snapchat. Am I missing any other ones?
Probably.
Boy, yeah, they're coming out pretty quickly, so. So agenda review and adjustments. In front of you is one more teacher nomination. As we discussed last time, the music teacher that we had hired ran into some issues. So this is the replacement for that position that we had talked about last time. I would like to request that we put that into the consent, unless somebody has any issues and would like to discuss it further. Otherwise, I would request that we put that into consent. Let's see, I think that was it.
Yep, that's the
Right,
other
okay.
adjustment.
So that was the only adjustment I would request. Any concerns about tossing the teacher nomination into the consent agenda, taking care of it with the rest of the business? Okay, good. Any other agenda reviews or adjustments? Okay, so with that, we'll put that into the consent as we get there, and then turn it over for the focus on learning.
Yeah, so I will invite Lindsay Cox to the front she will tell you the variety of hats that she wears within the organization, but one of those has been and will continue to be building the high school advisory program. And so she's back to report out on, I think you will agree, some amazing progress that's happened in our advisory program over the course of this school year.
Hey, welcome back.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. Thank you so much for having me this evening. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to be presenting about year one of a comprehensive advisory program at Winooski High School. Let's see if I can do this. No, didn't work on either. Okay.
At the end of the day, it's always the technology that fails you.
Okay, something like that. Anyways, my name is Lindsay Cox. I wear a variety of hats here, as Sean mentioned. I am the advisory coordinator, which is why I'm presenting on advisory tonight. But the other things that I do here at the school, I teach in our iLab. I'm also the Flexible Pathways facilitator. And if you remember back to January, I was here presenting on some Flexible Pathways pilots that were happening in the spring. And that was all through my work with the Roland Fellowship this year. So I look forward to hopefully coming back sometime next year and giving you an update on how all of that is going. But tonight we are going to focus on advisory. So the few things that we are going to look at this evening, why advisory, why such an important role that advisory plays, why focus on it, to learn a little bit about the advisory program here at Winooski High School, to look at some data, and then to talk about what comes next for advisory and what's needed to support advisory. So a lot of the push towards a comprehensive advisory program in secondary education comes with this tandem shift to student-centered learning. And with student-centered learning comes a focus on personalization. And it's really key when you're personalizing learning that adults and students have strong relationships. And so that is one of the reasons that advisory is really being looked at and focused on in secondary schools across the country, and very specifically in New England, especially schools that have shifted or states that have shifted to proficiency-based graduation requirements, as a way to support students starting to take more ownership of their learning, really starting to personalize not just learning within a classroom, but learning pathways that they're taking, the learning experiences that they're taking. So I did a lot of research on advisory, and kind of one of the most important things I think that I can share with you this evening is the why of advisory, so that you can help be the communicators of that why out in our community. Students at the Center Hub is a Nellie Mae funded research initiative on student-centered learning, and it publishes a lot of different briefs that are really based on some outstanding research. And the quote that I want to share with you this evening that really highlights the why for me comes from a brief that was published out of Stanford, and it was called Equal Opportunity for Deeper Learning. So the quote reads, "Advisory programs, which provide a structure to facilitate deep and lasting relationships between teachers and students, have the power to become the touchstone for the school day, a central component of each student's high school trajectory and the heart of the conjoined academic and wraparound support system that enables all students to succeed." So at the heart of advisory, for me, exists the need for equity and deeper learning opportunities. And without the opportunity for students to have an adult in the building who knows them well, who's there to advocate for them, it's really the inequity in deeper learning opportunities has been seen. And so for me, this is why we do advisory. It has taken us a couple years to get here, so we're going to take a quick look back at a little bit of the history of how we got to advisory at Winooski. So in 2015, 2016, there was a task force established, and there were a couple of parents on it, including one current board member. There was a bunch of teachers and a couple of students, and the task force was facilitated by a Nellie Mae Partnership for Change fellow that year, Amy Dixon. And they met a variety of times throughout the year, and they talked about what advisory could look like here, why advisory. They identified really the need for advisory, which really drove back to the need for equity in the type of learning that the high school was shifting towards. And so that entire task force spent the year really developing the vision for advisory, developing the goals, talking to teachers, talking to students, and really doing some research on what could this look like here. The following year, the intention was to implement advisory, but there were a variety of barriers that kind of stood in the way for a pretty rapid implementation. And so last year, the 2016-17 school year, there wasn't a comprehensive advisory program, but there were a couple of important shifts that helped lay the foundation for what we were able to do this year. So those shifts including students having to stay in their advisory and not getting to go around and visit and just kind of be wherever they wanted to be during advisory, the kind of establishment of this is a place that you needed to be with a teacher, with a group of students. And then there were a couple of things that we had asked advisors to do with students with regards to the PLP work that happened on half days and that happened that year. So there were some good shifts, but we didn't really fully implement advisory until this year. And that was made possible from a bunch of work that happened at the end of the 2016-17 school year and then the summer, which involved one-to-one conversations with teachers, involved a lot of planning, and then it involved stipending the advisory coordinator to actually design the curriculum over the summer and put that in place. So that's going to lead us to what does advisory actually look like here at Winooski High School. There was a document that I think was sent out on Monday. I'm not sure if you all were able to take a look at it or not, but it was called Advisory at WHS. I'm going to share the highlights, so if you didn't get to look at it, don't worry. So the purpose of the Winooski High School Advisory is to cultivate healthy and caring relationships within the school community while fostering academic and personal growth and well-being. This is the statement that task force created in 2015-16, and a lot of the work that has happened this year rests on the foundation that they created. There are three main goals for advisory that task force also established. One is that advisors know students well. The second is that advisory supports students in working towards their academic and personal goals, as well as their post-high school plans. And then the third is that advisory is a collaborative learning community for students to connect with each other, as well as their advisor. And so those three goals this year have been met through 4 curricular strands that have been implemented in advisory through different activities that students do with each other and with their advisors. So the 4 strands are right in front of you. These strands include building strong relationships, college and career exposure and support. We look at the exposure piece as the 9th, kind of 10th grade piece, and the support for actual applying and planning in the 11th and 12th grade. Strengthening culture and community, that's not just within our school, but within our town, within our state. There's not really a limit on that one. And then academic advising. And so we use these 4 curricular strands to plan everything that we do in advisory. This year was the first year, and I kind of consider implementing any new program like you would consider dropping a stone in a pond and you watch the concentric circles move out. The first year you can do kind of one circle, maybe two, but you know that that ripple effect is going to continue to move outward. And so this year, we really focused on the building strong relationships piece. The others were definitely there, and I'm going to share with you examples of all of them. But a majority of the focus went into the relational piece so that these new advisories, these new groups of students and teachers that stay together for 4 years could be established and could be strong. Advisory here follows a predictable schedule. We use a lot of rituals and routines so that students try to get used to what happens in advisory. Ideally, advisory is supporting student ownership of learning through PLP work, and then advisory is also hopefully helping to develop student voice. So talking about the rituals and routines that we practice, the philosophy is resting on the philosophy of restorative practice. And so one of the things that became a ritual here every week, usually on Mondays, are circles like they do in restorative practice. So a little bit about restorative practice and why this was an important concept to bring into advisory. Schools are a reflection of the values of our society, and advisory reflects the values of the school. And so circles, they don't intentionally get right to the issue. They're not a confrontational experience. Circles take time to build relationships, and they create shared spaces of learning and of conversation in order to increase emotional safety. And circles are a tool to practice being in community, and they are really very much about listening. They're not so much about talking. And so we used circles this year for a variety of reasons, but they really make it, they work to flatten the hierarchy between teacher and student, which was an important proponent to bring into advisory. And then they also, they make it really hard for any one student to completely disappear. Because when you're in circle, everybody is offered the opportunity to speak. You don't have to take it. But at least everybody is seen, everybody is given a space. Even if a student is in a room and not interested in being physically a part of the circle, there's a chair put for them so that when they are ready, or if they want to choose to join the circle, they can. So it's very much about that inclusivity and finding a safe space. When students are in circle, they're practicing a variety of different things: problem solving, equality, shared leadership, modeling of different behaviors, responsibility, different empathy and emotional literacy, respect, self-regulation, and self-awareness. There were circles that we did this year for each of the 4 kind of curricular strands of advisory. Oftentimes the circles had to do with building strong relationships, but we used circles to learn about each other's cultures, to build our community. We used circles to talk all about different issues that sometimes were affecting us, and we use circles to talk about goal setting and future planning and things of that nature. Our teachers got to practice facilitating circles at in-service in August. It was one of the few professional development things that we did for advisory, but circles were not only modeled at our in-service in August, we did one every morning with the middle high school staff, and different advisors led them, and then advisors actually got to lead intentionally the circle that they would practice during the beginning of the school year. So that was a big piece of support for teachers. And our teachers that are our advisors in the high school, there are 17 advisories this year, so there are only 17 of our about 28 teachers who are advisors. And those teachers teach 5 classes or 5 preps, whereas teachers who are not an advisor teach 6. So that was one of the major obstacles that was overcome with teachers to be able to allow the implementation of a curriculum. And advisory follows a very, very predictable schedule. And so that's how we ensure consistency. Now, this is not meant for you to be able to read what's on the screen, but just for you to be able to get an idea of this is how we communicate as an advisors, is that there is a master calendar. It exists for every single day that there was advisory this school year. And on every single day, there are links to whatever the activity was that was supposed to be done that day. As advisory coordinator, I designed all of these activities and created them, and I email out weekly at the beginning of the week a kind of this is what's up this week and what you should be doing. And it's the advisor's role to implement all of this work with fidelity. And sometimes that means changing around the order. Sometimes that means looking at the circle and switching a question because they know that a kid in their advisory might be triggered by it. Sometimes that means looking at the weather, especially as it starts to get cold, and knowing if it's the last nice day, they're going to go outside today and they're going to do the activity tomorrow. The advisors really have autonomy over how the curriculum is implemented, but the goal was consistency this year. So all advisors had access to all the same materials. They knew exactly what everybody was doing every day, and it was their role to implement it in the way that they best felt was going to work for their kids. So here are some of the things that we've actually done this year. Building strong relationships, as I mentioned, is the main theme that we did. Circles were one of the main ways that we built relationships with one another. There was also a couple really fun things. There was an advisory challenge this year where advisories had a challenge every month and they could earn points. It was an ongoing challenge, and then they could win a pizza party at the end of the year. So challenges included things like photo challenges, mannequin challenges, there was a field days challenge, there was a lip sync challenge, there was a lot of advisory challenges. And there were also two, actually, spirit weeks where there were different days where kids could dress up, and with like a variety of different days where they could choose what they decided to wear. And then advisory field trips were, I would say, according to student feedback, one of the most successful relationship building pieces that we did. Advisories got to design an experience that would bring them closer together and build relationships stronger within the advisory, and then go and do it. So some advisories decided to have a meal together. This is the Savage Advisory. They went to Henry's Diner and had a meal together. And they chose to do that because there were a couple of kids in their advisory who had never said they had never been to a breakfast diner. And so that was just one of the things that they decided they wanted to do together as a group. Go, order off the menu, eat Greasy Spoon, iconic diner, be downtown in Burlington. It was a beautiful day, so they got to walk on Church Street afterwards, that sort of thing. Some advisories went to a place like the escape room, where you literally have to like problem solve as a group to get out of a locked room. Some advisories went the like have fun together route, and they went to get air and jumped on trampolines, or they went bowling. So there was a lot of successful field trips, and I think this is, according to student feedback, one of the most successful things that helped build relationships in advisory, and one of the things students said they don't want to go away for next year. In terms of college and career exposure and support, there were a variety of circles that talked about goal setting and planning for, next week, next month, next year, 5 years out, a lot of those sorts of pieces. In October, every student in the school got to visit a college campus. So this is some of the freshman class at St. Mike's, and seniors got to choose what campus they went to, but freshmen went to St. Mike's, and sophomores went to CCV. They got to learn about the dual enrollment options, and then juniors went to UVM. There was an opportunities fair in February that students got to hear from different employers and educational learning experiences that are outside of the classroom to try to find summer jobs or summer learning experiences. And then we regularly had, especially for seniors, senior meetings with the VSAC counselor, Liam Danaher, who would come in and tell seniors, like, you should be here, make meetings with them. And that's something that we're going to be expanding to all of the grades for next year, but that consistent VSAC meeting and connection. Strengthening culture and community. I don't know if you have been in the PAC this year, but these are advisory flags. So every single advisory designed their own flag, and this became not only one of the advisory challenges, but also like the thing that represented them as an advisory and really strengthened their culture and community. But it also came out of a circle where people talked about like pride in their culture and what that means, and also images and symbolism between colors and shapes and all sorts of things like that. So that seemed to be pretty successful according to a lot of the student feedback. We did a couple circles on culture and what it means to come from the culture that you do. And then we also twice this year held advisory potlucks where advisories could bring in food. Some advisories took it as an opportunity to grab some donuts, and some had like real cultural potlucks, and so it was really cool to see. And then last, the academic advising, twice a week, ideally twice a week, sometimes our schedule didn't allow for it. Advisors were having one-to-one conversations with students. And the one-to-one conversations, in an ideal world, happen once a month. You get 10 or 15 minutes once a month with your advisor just to check in on how you doing, how are classes, what's going on, and every month there was a different theme. For example, like empathy interviews or having preparing and doing time management stuff, and so advisors got a list of suggested questions and they could use them. They didn't have to for these one-to-one conversations. And we did a lot of reflecting when we did get feedback. So when there was progress reports or report cards, that would come into the conversation, those sorts of things. There's a lot that we did this year, and there's also a lot that we could improve on. And that takes us to the data part of this presentation. So I tried to collect data in a variety of different ways this year. I did 2 student surveys, one in December and one in May, 2 teacher surveys, one in October and one in May. I did one-on-one teacher conversations, advisor conversations in October, and then in January and May, teachers did circles with each other during faculty meetings that produced some feedback as well. And then I also had a monthly meeting with a group that I called advisory representatives. And advisory reps were 1 student from every advisory, sometimes 2, who would come, and we met monthly and we talked about how advisory was going, what they wanted to see, what they liked, what they didn't like, and that sort of thing. So that was the way that I collected feedback, and there's a ton to share and talk about, but here's just a couple of the highlights. As I mentioned, there were 17 teachers this year. In October, they all took the survey, and in May, I missed one of them somehow. So there are a lot of questions that I asked them, but I think the most important question is just the basic, like, how's advisory going for you overall? And on a kind of 1 to 5 scale. In October, there were 2 people, one in the 1 column, which is terrible. Advisory is the least favorite part of my day. And there was 1 advisor in the not good, I'm struggling category, and then everybody else was kind of above that. And so being able to get that feedback and then connecting with those advisors and offering them support. In May, when we did the survey again, nobody was in the 1 or 2 column. A lot of the people who had said that they were 3, which is decent, I think I'm getting the hang of it, jumped up to 4. And the 5s, the awesome, I love advisory people, stayed pretty consistent both times. So they're just like gung-ho, they're gonna love advisory no matter what. But I think overall, this shows that it's a pretty strong engagement for teachers with advisory, and also that they're, happy with at least how the program has gone this year. Every advisory received data from student feedback. And so in January, each advisor got an individual report of the feedback that their advisees put forth. And that report, this is just like an example of the page, not for you to necessarily be able to read it, but just every single question that was asked of students, I was able to break it down by advisory so that each advisor got personal feedback on what their advisees said. And in January, they did a faculty meeting circle looking at this data and just saying, what does it mean and what might that change for me as an advisor? And then I just got the student feedback from the May survey, so they will all get that again, and we'll be able to use that in our August in-service to take a look at 2 data points from the first year of advisory, how advisees felt about advisory and what that might mean for them as an advisor, and what they do the same and what they change. In terms of the student data, this is kind of some of the aggregate student data. So in December, there were 90 students who responded. In May, there were 120 students who responded. I asked them the same questions so that I could get kind of just a taste of where they were at. This question is, how is advisory just going for you overall? Same question that I just showed you for the teachers. In December, there were 69% of the students who responded who were in the good or awesome category. They were a 4 or a 5. And in May, there was 76% who were a 4 or a 5. In both December and May, there were only 3 students who answered at a 1 or a 2. And I think that is the thing that I would like to highlight most about this data, is that out of 90 students, 3 said they were a 1 or a 2. And in May, 120 students responded. And again, 3, and I don't know if it's the same 3 or a different 3, responded that they were a 1 or a 2. So overall, strong student engagement in terms of how advisory is going for them. Another important question that I asked of students, because advisory is not just a one-way street, it's a two-way street, and students definitely need to give like the effort that will help them form relationships. So I know the names of all the other students in my advisory. In December, 91% of the students said that they agree or strongly agree that they know the names of all the other students in their advisory. I thought that was pretty amazing. And in May, 97% said that they knew all of the names of the students in their advisory. So the fact that we're focusing on strong relationships this year was kind of the main goal, but that this isn't a passive experience for students. There's something they can contribute to it. And then the other important relationship that I asked about is about their relationship with their advisor. So I actually asked 3 questions. I'm only showing you one up here, but I asked 3 questions about advisor-advisee relationships. One is, I have made an effort to get to know my advisor. 2 was, my advisor is one of the teachers that knows me best at school. And then the other question is, this one you see in front of you. If I had a problem or concern in school, I would talk to my advisor about it. What's important to look at are the red and the blue, because those are the 4s and the 5s in terms of agree or strongly agree with, if I had a problem or concern in school, I would talk to my advisor about it. The reason I asked the other question about I have made an effort to get to know my advisor is that there was a really strong correlation between kids who said they did not make an effort and then kids who also said they would not go talk to their advisor. So that was interesting to me, just in terms of students kind of self-reporting. I think that the data shows this relationship piece of advisory is really important. It is the main focus, and ideally, or hopefully, we have about 80% of our students who have said yes, they will go talk to their advisor if they have a question or concern in the school. And I think, obviously, we'd like it to be 100%, but that's not bad for year 1. And that takes us to what is next for advisory. So in terms of those concentric circles, we started this year with building strong relationships, but I think in order for us to continue to grow advisory and move those circles out, it's important to start thinking about advisory not as separate from the curriculum or from academic outcomes, but really in service to those academic outcomes. Students spent 5,220 minutes in advisory this year. Students spend 3,870 minutes in a 1-semester class. So you spend about 3/4 of the time, if it was a full year class, that you would spend in class in advisory with your fellow advisees and with your advisor. And 100% of our students are served by the advisory program. The only high school students who are not in an advisory are the students who participate in James Papes's program, which is the kind of alternative high school program. So they have their own structure they use for an advisory. Every other student in the school is served in advisory. In order for that to work well, we need to continually support it, and that takes money. So there are 3 kind of big picture or big bucket ways that I think advisory needs to continue to be sustained. The first one is an advisory coordinator. I think it's really key to have a point person who has time to really keep the work aligned with the vision and to keep consistency, to support advisors, to problem solve. Just overall, it works to have a person to help run the program. I would say even after 4 or 5 years, when there's probably a pretty solid curriculum, there are always things shifting and changing. There's always a variety of needs, and I think it's really important that there is someone whose job it is to be in charge of that. Training for advisors and for student leaders. So we did a little bit of training for advisors during the August in-service. It was around circles and restorative practice. After looking at the feedback from teachers that I just got last month, the thing they are asking for is support for having those one-to-one conversations, especially as they relate to post-secondary planning. So I think that makes a lot of sense, right? As teachers, we're not trained as guidance counselors or VSAC counselors. We don't know necessarily anything outside of our own experience or maybe what we've supported other students or our own children through. So teachers are really looking to do better in that area and be able to support students, but they need some training for that. Training for student leaders is a big one. This summer, I'm going to be taking 6 students who are going to serve as the executive council for advisory reps next year to the Youth Leadership Institute in August, which is a 3-day Youth Leadership Institute put on by the Nellie Mae Education Foundation for New England high school students. So the goal is that those students will kind of take the lead for the advisory reps, which will continue to be one from every advisory and continue to move student voice and student leadership forward. That's going to take a little bit of training and a little bit of leadership training, and I think that that type of training works well for students when it doesn't come from one of their teachers, potentially, but when it comes from some outside, more youth-based leadership organization. And then the last thing is systems that support the goals of advisory. So one of the reasons that it's been really challenging to do academic advising is that we don't have a technology system that allows advisors to see where students are at with their GP progressions or their GX situation, even like what their transcript really looks like. It's a challenge, and I'm sure y'all have heard about Web to School. We have a committee here who's looking at changing our student management system, but that is going to be so crucial for doing that goal of academic advising well in advisory. So I just want to emphasize how important that is, as I'm sure there will be some sort of recommendation brought to you of a new system sometime in the next year, and who knows what the cost of that will be, but whatever it is, it's worth it. So that leads me to my last slide, which is next year's goals. Better communication with families. This year I did put out a monthly newsletter in the school district community newsletter. There was a letter in the mailers that went out in August and again in the December report card just about an update for advisory for high school students, but that was about it in terms of communication with families, so I definitely would like to do more with that. Potentially advisors calling families, being kind of the point person like they do in the middle school for families if they have a question about what's going on with their student. More training, more aligned academic advising, student ownership of learning, so more work with PLPs, and then differentiating the college exposure piece, working with VSAC and doing meetings for every single grade level every month for where they should be doing, what they should be doing, what they should be thinking about in terms of moving towards post-secondary planning. So that's some of the goals that I have for advisory for next year. But at the end of the day, advisory this year and moving forward will always first and foremost be very much about students finding and feeling family and safety and support here at school. And just I'll leave you with this last photo, which is one of my favorites. This is the Drew Blanchard advisory. I'm not sure if you all know Drew. He's the guy in the middle with the real beard. And this is Teacher Lookalike Day, and all of his advisees, you didn't have to dress up like your advisor, but all of his advisees decided they were going to wear beards like Mr. Blanchard and dress up. And to me, this is what advisory is actually all about. So that's it. Thank you.
Doesn't surprise me.
Questions?
Go ahead.
You mentioned about college training and what they want more of that type of skill set. What would be your ideal kind of training support in that?
So I think it would, there's a couple different ideas that I have. One is actually more of a conversational technique that guidance counselors get trained in, and I've talked to both our guidance counselor and our former guidance counselors about this, and it's how to ask questions as opposed to giving answers,
Right.
which I know sounds like a pretty simple thing,
No,
but
I know.
it's so hard to do when you're in a conversation with a student and you just want to shake them and be like, this is what you should do. And so I think that's one piece for advisors, just some strategies and some tools for having conversations that get students to think about the options as opposed to telling them what they should do. And then the other piece of that is working more with Heidi, our guidance counselor, and Liam, our VSAC counselor, and designing some scaffolded trainings that are really for students but also for advisors. So if Liam's presenting on what you should be doing your first semester of freshman year, if you're thinking about college, all those advisors are going to hear that. Ideally, he's going to have some resources that he can share, and then they're going to be able to use those in their one-to-one conversations. So those are two pieces that I've started thinking about for next year. There are probably more that could be really helpful, but also being cautious about how much we're expecting advisors to know and do. They can't know all of the college requirements and programs that are out there and what colleges require what, and that's a skill set that is pretty robust, but they can definitely use resources from the people who have that skill set to help their students, their advisees.
The second question, now that I'm thinking about it, is there a way for, and the answer could just be no on this, but is there a way for the community to be more involved in the advisory? Like, I guess the question is like, how can we help as citizens of Winooski, whether we're a parent or not, to kind of be involved, to kind of be supportive of this wonderful program?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. As parents, I think just if you have a high school age child, talking to your kid about advisory, asking them about it like you ask them about classes, really putting it on the same playing field would be really important. Also, this year, there was a desire for a lot of advisories to want to do service learning. And it's actually a challenge to find something that students can do where they feel like they are giving back to their community, that fits within usually like specific time parameters during the day and those sorts of things. So I guess it would also be fantastic if there were folks in the community who had a service opportunity and wanted to communicate that. We have lots of advisories who are really interested in doing that as a way to contribute to their community. We had one advisory, the Bundy advisory, who for their advisory field trip did just a green up day around Winooski because they wanted to. They did their own green up day. And then they had lunch at Sneakers. But that was kind of what they wanted to do because that was something they had done. They had also done like a canned food drive in December. They had done a bunch of kind of service. So that's how their advisory came together. And opportunities like that would be great to have brought. They're hard to find.
I don't have a question, just a comment to say I was keeping track of every time that your presentation overlapped with our end statement, and it was a lot, so just great work.
Thanks. And to add to that compliment, it's impressive how thorough the intention has been and taking time to really grow sustainable roots into building a program that's comprehensive for both faculty and students, because that relationship's so important. And I think the relationship, what we found in our conversations with high school students is faculty and relationships were the strongest point of pride and strength that we heard from the high school students. And I couldn't think in my head, like, well, this has been the year that's been happening. I'm sure it's been happening, but the fact that it's so intentional with layers of building skill sets that's going to propel kids into the world, and that it's going to be supported. I think thinking about the schedule to support faculty to do it well, and then knowing what the funding sources are going to be to keep this, because it is an integral part of learning, not just academic. So I just am so impressed with, and also getting feedback so that you can continue to strengthen, so that you hear both from students and teachers about how this is going. It's incredibly impressive. Yeah.
One of my favorite parts of the student feedback is that I asked the question, what would you like to keep about advisory and what would you like to change about advisory? And circles were 50-50 on both. Half of the students said they wanted to keep them and half of them said they wanted to get rid of them. And I love that because to me that means that they're working, because they're uncomfortable for students and they're a place where students can't hide. And so even the kids who said that I want to get rid of them, I think that there's something to that we need to like pay attention to. But also our students could probably speak to it. I think we have freshmen this year haven't known anything else. So that's one thing that I think in a couple of years we're going to have students who all know about the strength of advisory. Alex unfortunately is at tech, so he doesn't get to enjoy advisory. Our tech students, they're being transported during our advisory time, so they're usually not in advisory. Destiny as a junior probably has had a very different experience than Sophia as a sophomore, but no matter what, they all had a year or two where this didn't exist as advisory, so they have this comparative framework, whereas I think if you talk to a freshman, you would have a different response. So I'm also interested to see how some of the responses and feedback change as we start to have students who have only known this as advisory.
Destiny, can I put you on a spot
Yeah.
for a 30-second, maybe 40-second view
Yeah.
of your thoughts on the advisory?
Well, I just want to say I actually appreciate advisory because in the past 2 years of like my freshman and sophomore year, advisory just hasn't meant anything to me. Students would just go in the corner of the room and watch like videos on their phone or like play on their phone and just keep to themselves. But then coming into the school year, we were told, okay, let's circle up. And it's just like, what does this mean? Because circling up is something we did in middle school or elementary school, and it's like, okay, this feels a little childish, which is like the immediate response like the students had. And at first it was uncomfortable, like Lindsay had said, you had to share, where am I struggling, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and you were put in a room with students that you probably wouldn't really typically speak to, but they were in your same class, like a same age group. But yeah, at first my advisor and I weren't very close, but then we started bonding by talking about like our favorite TV shows and all that stuff, and then as students, we probably didn't talk to each other before, but then going on the advisory field trips, doing these challenges together, we learned more about each other and the personalities and stuff. And also as a junior advisory, we did a lot of talking about college and career, since it's like the year where the pressure's on. And our advisor was like our second high school guidance counselor. Like if we couldn't go to Heidi, I could go to my advisor, because he may not be as knowledgeable, but over time I just felt comfortable with him because I just got to see him every day, and yeah, it was consistency, I guess. Yeah.
Sophia, do you want to share anything? You don't have to. Go, you get it.
I like advisory, but sometimes the circles, people get annoyed of them. They're like, oh my gosh, a circle? Or like, if someone else has a circle, they're like, oh, you have a circle? And they're just not happy about it. But whenever I'm in a circle and I speak to my fellow students or my teachers, I kind of feel more happier. But then some days I just don't like the question. And then I just feel grumpy about it.
There's the 50-50.
Yeah.
Well, and Sophia had an experience this year where her advisor was out on paternity leave for like 3 months of the year. So when I did notice that when you have that inconsistency, and there's another advisory as well where they had one advisor for a first couple months and then she went out on maternity leave, and when looking at the disaggregated data from those two advisories, it's definitely different. And so it is like that consistency of advisor. I wonder what Sophia would say if her advisor had been here all year, how that experience might be different.
I think my substitute advisor was really good with us, and she really encouraged people to come together, but then they wouldn't listen to her. So yeah, I understand why his maternity leave will make different decisions.
Thank you.
I think looking down, yeah, thank you very much, appreciate that. I noted a couple of things, but I think it was what Matt hit, how this segues in with the ends, but as Tori had mentioned as well, the deep bond, personalized learning. Kids aren't going to do it by themselves. One guidance counselor, not going to handle all the kids we got in a school. So I think inevitably this is a path that is, they go together. I think it's like a glove. I start thinking about things like at least my focus, and I know we have it as a board monitoring thing, is that we're not going to hit state requirements for 4-year graduation rates. With our new American population, it's going to take a couple of years just to get them halfway there. So understanding that we can keep those kids here for the retention piece, those bonds are a key piece of it. So I think that will help a lot. I think this goes to one of the previous conversations we had too, and that is training all of our staff to be able to be the best they can be, so we don't have some kids falling through the cracks over 4 years, and not falling through the cracks, but not getting as much out of the advisory as some others. And then the only piece that I wanted to toss out, and it doesn't have a question mark on it, it'll have a period at the end, and that is, and I'm going to look to Leon as well, that is the contractual items that get in the way of us doing the right things. I think we've been pretty good over the last couple of years about working out a way, midstream, on the fly, to do what's best for the kids and not to stop short because the contract says we can't. But as we move into another contract cycle, we want to make sure that those kinds of things we're never going to take care of them, because if we move as fast as we need to get what we want to put in place, we can't see what 3 years from now brings. But to make it open-ended enough that we can do that. I don't want the contracts to get in the way. So just keep that as we go forward, be able to, help us help you by trying to see into the future that we can't see into. Tough task, but.
Was the allowing the advisors to have the extra time a part of this contextual thing, or did that Because that's awesome. I mean, I'm glad that you highlighted that there has been time allocated to something this important. Because when you put resources to it, it highlights the fact of how important it is, and that it does take time to make sure everyone's feeling safe and good. And
And if we need to sit and do side letters and make sure that everybody agrees that we need to do something different, whatever, until the next cycle. I just want to make sure. Alex?
The comments that are going on here is I'm kind of interested in whether the teachers who did advisory found differences in their own pedagogy in the classrooms, and how would that compare with the teachers who did not do advisory? Like, did the tighter relationships help with their teaching within the classrooms? And I don't know if you have those questions on the survey, but it's something to food for thought, because when we're talking about contract, we know all teachers, it's like when they think it's something that's an additional part, what's the first answer? No. Just like me, when someone asks me to do something extra and I don't get the whole bigger point. But if we put it in the context that we can show with some data that, hey, this actually helps with other, what they think is their regular duties, it may be something that may kind of motivate and kind of lower some of those like contract kind of negotiation. And it's just really more of a observation and food for thought, and just thinking about because all the skills that you mentioned about what the teacher, that empathy, learning how to turn not yes or no questions, but open, that's all inquiry-based learning in one sense, right? Like, and so that's already what we're trying to move them for. So if this kind of moves us even faster to that, we should be thinking about that.
I actually had written something down similar to that, because I had an advisory for 12 years, and it's one of the things I miss the most because I don't have one here. Is that as a teacher, it did change how I interacted with students over time, because you don't pick your advisees, they don't pick you. And so, and at least the goal, I think, of our advisory and the one that I was in too, was it was a heterogeneous grouping of students. So you don't always have a natural connection with another human being. And as a teacher, your job is to figure out how to do that, and so, and you take those skills into the classroom with your typical job responsibilities, right? And it does change, but it takes time. The other thing I was going to mention was there's just so many hidden benefits to this that you don't see until, we have one of my advisees was a babysitter for my daughters growing up, and graduated from UVM, professional photographer, teaches one of my kids how to take pictures, took her senior pictures. It's just a wonder. It's like a part of our family. I was able to connect one of my former advisees with one of our graduates recently who's interested in stage production. She works for Snoop Dogg, and she has worked on Broadway. And this former graduate just graduated from college looking for a job, and her mom told me they had a 2-hour discussion last night. So and the other part of it is kids who wouldn't normally, like one of you had mentioned, who probably wouldn't connect with each other during the day, are now connecting. So you're building a more inclusive climate and culture in the school, which then in the classroom plays itself out.
Well, I wanted to ask you in one sense if that building of that cohesive community, whether a bullying instance, like that's not a data point that's kind of like you're connecting, but if we can connect some of these larger bullets and that, because one of the most annoying things as someone who looks at data is when you go to someone and go, why did the numbers decrease?
Right.
Well, this is probably leading to something that decreases, and thinking about it so that you don't really, not to put more work on you to give you more numbers to collect, but like look at some of the other numbers and put the story together on a more comprehensive thing. So
yeah, and we can cross-reference that with the Youth Risk Behavior Survey over time, to see that, whether it's bullying or feeling like I matter in the community, or some of those established questions already.
And one of the exciting things, sorry, I'll stop talking after this, talk too much, I know, is that one of the exciting things that I like about this advisory notion is, and I'm sure, and if we can get the teachers to admit this, is that it's learning that goes two-way street, right? And I think I heard some of the things that you missed. Like, I'm sure that our students are teaching our faculty something, and if we can find ways to get that out too as a data point, as a data collection, it helps in the longer run on the contracts. It helps loosen some of those barriers of the resistance of like, no. I mean, and you're right. That's what one of the hardest things when I went to UVM was missing my student connection, and now I'm starting to build that up again and stuff. So thank you.
Yes,
Apologies.
thank you very much.
Thanks, Lindsay.
All right. Public comments. Any public comments? All right. Seeing none, we'll move. You want to wait? Okay. Take care, Leon. Thank you.
See you, Liam. Do you have advisory over Jen's?
Yes.
You do? Yep. You stay with the same group, right? Yeah, that's what it was like at CV too. I like that model. You just get to know kids so well and their families and. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To have structure rather than free
Because it's what she describes is it can just be a,
Right.
study hall.
yeah.
Well, and the advisor does have to provide leadership to set the
Yes.
tone for the space and
So
what
it is
the
another
expectations.
class in a
Otherwise, it can end up just being a, you know, you kind of come and sit around.
We're noticing, because we do it at the beginning of the day, absent being late to school, because really school doesn't really start until second block, right?
We had,
And then,
we had that too. It was right before second block. So if a kid didn't have a first block class,
right,
they would come in at 10 instead of coming in at 9:45 for the 20-minute advisory. Yeah, that was a problem. It's
yeah.
hard.
And so switching the schedule to sort of highlight this importance, especially because I think simultaneously it's got to be important, it's got to be, yeah. It's fascinating.
Moving on to consent. Again, just a reminder that in the consent agenda, we will also add the teacher nomination being done tonight for the high school, for the middle school music teacher. I would ask for, accept a motion to accept the consent agenda with the addition of this teacher nomination as noted.
So moved.
McNeil. All right, any other discussion in the consent?
There was some fantastic information in the superintendent report.
A Grammy.
Right? We got Grammy
Yeah,
money.
right on.
Whoop, whoop. I think this interesting, I really like the combining of the Housing Commission and City Council information is super important because it absolutely impacts our population that we serve here in the school. It's really nice to have that. Yeah, there was just some.
And that one, it sounds like the intentionality gets to what Alex was talking about not pricing out some of our population, you know, and making sure that that's intentional.
Right. And training,
And I
just
think it's
there's
great
just
that you're involved in that. We appreciate that.
Yes.
It's interesting work.
yeah. So thank you. That's great information.
All right.
All around.
All those in favor accept the consent agenda, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Under section 7, executive limitations, we have the treatment of staff, piece 2.2. Yeah. Let's see, we just had one very, very minor adjustment. Sean, you want to?
Yep. So on the last, actually, it's all one sentence, is it? The only sentence under the interpretation in number 1, the final line should have the word laws between state and pertaining. So it would read,
Oh.
and how to work with federal and state laws pertaining to employment.
And then the only other comment I had here then is an interesting peek at moving into the future here. And Sean and I had talked about this already and how it may impact some of the other write-ups that he does on the executive limitations and the evidence under 1. there's a comment about all new staff meet with the executive assistant to the superintendent rather than the HR person next year. So the next time we see this, those kinds of
nice,
things will
yeah.
start transferring to a place where they really
Right.
belong,
Right on.
rather than to somebody who happens to take it because we've now forced it on their time.
Right.
So
That's exciting.
That is
help
good.
a little bit. I think that's just tying things together. So.
The only other new language in there really is on top of page 2, where included some evidence around the My Performance Survey.
That's great.
Right, and I think that is key in that survey that we did on you is intended exactly at that point, is to make sure that these kinds of things have a secondary piece, so.
I have to make an overall comment about the capacity to truly understand as a board member about how we're meeting our policies. This breaks it down. It gives us so much more information about the components in place to keep our faculty informed and well cared for. And you can really see, it really helps you sort of see the structures that are in place to make that happen. Prior to policy governance, that was not the information we would get.
Right.
And this makes it just so much more clear about how the rules that are written, the policies are written, are actually being implemented in the ways so that you can see the action behind it to ensure that it's happening. And it's awesome to read it.
Yeah, and I think about that often,
those
but
of us that like
I think a little bit differently on, I think it's more the time frame that I think about it, and that is, if we 5 are gone, as is Sean, do we still get the feel, does the new board still get the feel of the staff after everything changes? Do you still get that same, if something changes where the superintendent comes in with an iron hammer and starts beating things up, and the culture and the climate start to go back to where they were, is the board able to catch it earlier? Early on in the
Right.
cycle? Or if something changes, does it get caught early enough to be able to tell?
Well, I'm gonna reframe it in a different way, that the structures that are being described here in terms of respect and treatment to paid and volunteer staff, I don't know if these structures were in place prior. And I think that that's the other piece, is that it's, in my mind, as I'm reading through this of the, again, the actions and the structures that are put in place to make sure that people are well-informed, feel respected and honored in this system, that's sustainable. Because you would have to remove these things for staff to be uninformed and to be respected. And the fact that we do have one about treatment of staff is hugely important.
I think Mike has a point in the sense of, like, how do we track this from year to year? Like this, what we're basing on a lot of our stuff here. Like, I agree, I think the infrastructure is now there, but the key point is, how do we keep it continuing going on without having someone just come in and changing everything? And I think there's a little slight structural thing where we don't see previous years, or like what was the last year's thing, to see if there was a change. Who maintains those files, right? Because Sean, we all win the lottery, we decide that school board is not our thing anymore. Gets 5 new people, he decides like he can change all these things, and he could say 75% was good because we would have no clue what the previous year was, right? And in some ways it's that, is it an infrastructure where we ask to see a previous year, so that we can compare past and pro, which is more reading for us, which is not what I'm looking for. Or do we encourage some level of, now that we're getting a better cycle, that you always have some mention of the previous year's metrics and what you're doing in the front year, right, as part of the governance structure? And that's something, to your point about how do we know if something changes and gear them up, that's something that we do have to think about as a school board.
Well, I think we've hit a couple of these. Sorry, Sean.
No, go ahead.
I think we've hit a couple of them in the survey. I don't know that we've hit them well.
Right.
I don't know that we've hit them perfectly, but I think we've hit a couple of those questions in there. Can you do it all through that one survey? I think you get to a survey that nobody wants to answer and everybody walks away from it. Then you got nothing. But I think you're right. In some of these other ones, how do you put some kind of a measurement on the success of that particular executive limitation.
Well, it makes me wonder, since we do publish the monitoring reports online under each policy, do they just get replaced by the new year?
Online, they do.
There's the latest one,
online.
right?
But then there's a back, but we can always go back and look. And I think that might be something as board members, especially if we're new, to go back and compare to at least 1 year or even the prior year. Because these are on like a 3-year, 2-year.
Every year now.
Every
Now
year
we're
now.
doing them every year. This is the first year of every
Let's
year.
do it every year, so that we will have a nice backlog of information to keep ourselves honest about progress.
Right,
you know?
and then tie that forward where all 8 of these executive limitations are tied to your performance appraisal every year that we give you, and then is that getting better, is it getting worse, do you need remedial actions or activities, and then what are they? What sections are they wrapped around, and how do you measure it? Right, so I think you're right, it all kind of,
And once again, you're right, Tori. Like, y'all have done amazing work in laying the structure so that you can now do this. And so, like, if we want, we should pat ourselves on our backs right now and say
Yeah.
that.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I was thinking about it a little bit differently. So I think in addition to the idea that you have a new superintendent who comes in and wants to change things, or you have a few board members who come in and, in 1 year and want to change things, it also, in kind of the normal progression of things, you now have a complete system that you can say to a new person, this is how we do business. So you have a way to shepherd a new superintendent or new board members into the organization where there's an established set of policies and procedures and structures and evidence that has been built over time. And Tori, to your question, a lot of many of these things that, like, for evidence and documentation, everything, they were in the organization, but either one person knew where they were, or they were in a filing cabinet somewhere that only one person knew where it was. So this allows to say, okay, where is the evidence? What do we have? Let's bring it all together now and organize it.
Yeah, and transparency,
Yeah.
right? So that we all kind of know how we're operating.
any other discussion? All right, I would accept a motion to approve the superintendent monitoring report on policy 22, treatment of staff.
So moved?
Any other discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, now we get down to section 8, and finally, our introduction to our new student rep. Who wants to do it? Alex, you as the senior member of the student corps, would you like to do the intro?
So this is a weirdo. Oh wow! Surprise!
Surprise! You brought your sister to the table.
I didn't get any real power, so this was not like that.
Recuse yourself every once in a while, yes.
She's currently a rising senior or rising junior, and yeah, she's gonna be joining us from now on.
Great, welcome. Welcome aboard.
Can one of you talk a little bit about the process that happened that Sophia rose to the top?
Yeah. So our idea was to have, in the past 2 years, there's been a live vote in community meetings, so students would vote in a Google survey right at community meeting. But sometimes there was complaints that, oh, this is just a popularity contest. I don't really understand what I was hearing, but applicant A is the first one, or something like that. So we tried to make this more meaningful, and what we ended up doing was having the votes happen through advisories, so this way ELL students can also get involved, so their advisor can read to them what the applicant responses were. So, sorry, I backtrack a little bit. So what I had the applicants do was they would answer 3 prompts. I actually don't have them pulled up.
How do you define student voice?
Oh, yes.
How do you think Winooski is doing in terms of student voice and student-centered learning? Why do you believe this, and how do you think this could improve? And why do you think you should be a student rep on the school board? What skills, knowledge, abilities would you bring to the school?
I believe those were the application questions, but like the questions I had them answer were, sorry, for the statement. So every applicant wrote a statement that I would put into the Google form and that the advisor would read to them about each applicant anonymously. So the 3 prompts were list 3 of your own characteristics that allow you to be an advocating student representative. How do you plan on reaching out to students? And what are some pressing issues that you feel should be discussed and brought to the attention of school board members? I had each applicant respond in 2 sentences or less to each prompt, and just put those together, put those in the Google form, have the advisor read to them in circles or however the advisor chooses to do with them. I worked with Lindsay to do this, and it worked out well because we actually had a high number of responses in the Google survey. I think more than the previous years in the community meeting live vote, because at community meetings, some people were just like, I'm not going to do this. This isn't important. But I guess it was I heard that it was a little more meaningful this time. Students could process it, and here Sophia is. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yes, congrats. So, well, thank you for putting yourself out there. It's going to be interesting as we move forward. Like I mentioned earlier, I think we have students at the table. That's more than other boards have. We don't yet have a voting student member or voting student members. I don't know. I don't even know what that means or whether, how you go to put that in, but that would seem one of the next questions we need to ask ourselves. The other one I'm going to challenge you guys with is, Sophia, you over the next 2 years, and Destiny with you for next year, and in how do we get replacements is how, and as adults, I'm gonna fall right on my pencil here and say I have no idea on everything about this, but I really need to find out how we get deeper student voice in here, with regards to policy discussions, with regards to things that we may be asked to do about the school. It may require some homework on your part to go back and ask your peers and try to find a way to get back into, it sounds like with the circle in your community meetings, you have the ability to get there, and how do you ask those questions and then summarize some kind of a response to try to help us out. I'm going to challenge you with that over the next 2 years and one to see how we can deepen that student voice.
And to add, because we seem to like to take, ask you to do this, do this. And I know that we're giving you a big bonus and signing things on this at $0. So what I want to emphasize here too then is tell us what you want to get out of this experience. At some point, I would love to hear what are the proficiency things that you hope to gain out of this experience of being a school board member, and not be afraid to lean on any of the 5 of us and Sean on helping you develop the skills that you want to be the leader that you said that you wanted to be when you did this. And I'm going to encourage you to say at some point, and encourage all of us as school board members to say that, we'll be more than happy to help you develop the bullet points for your resume from doing this. We're more than happy to write college recommendation letters, job recommendation, those things. Be a reference point for you on anything that you want to do, because we truly believe that this isn't easy work. And what Mike's challenge is it's a tough challenge and stuff. But I don't want you to think that we just take. Right? This is going to be a two-way street and we're going to try to model the good things that Winooski School District is doing as a school board. And so I want to encourage that, and I open the invitation too to talk about colleges and all that. Be a third advisor or whatnot, and don't be afraid to contact me over the summer to talk about colleges and stuff. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that.
Thank you.
Good, well said, thank you. All right, anything else? Welcome aboard. We'll get your name tag, and Alex, you can hang yours proudly outside your door. All right, we'll turn it over to you guys for the student report.
Well, happy Junepao week. Last week of school, tomorrow's the last day. I think we both agreed that a lot of things went well this year for the high school, a new and improved advisory system with student reps. The middle school did a lot of work around project-based learning, like the circus and whatnot. Elementary school is still doing work with heart norms and practicing those.
As well as elementary students having their free time for now. They're having their field trips either to Essex cinemas or JP, anywhere fun to like boost their morale since it's the end of the year. Yeah, it's not over yet, but it's like they still have a long way to go. But like let's just celebrate their youth. So also as well, today was Spartan Games for the middle school. They participated in various events.
You know who won?
Ooh, that's not it.
It's heated.
Everybody's a winner in Winooski.
No.
We're in the Winoo.
They're really competitive. They're so competitive. Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'll go with that.
Wake up, Alex. Winners and losers here.
Your side of town is scary. I'm gonna stay on my side of town.
There's also a film festival showing off middle schoolers' work to the public. Yeah. Yeah. As well as yeah. Go.
Okay. Just gonna talk about some of the things that are happening, still happening in school. So right now, Lindsay Cox has been contacting and connecting with students about getting proficiencies or credits for their summer work in either internships, summer programs like MedCus or Governor's Institute, and having those count for their graduation. There's planning to do around that, so students are still going to be doing some learning, and throughout the summer they'll still be getting proficiencies or credits if they choose to.
And also with that, Dave McNally, one of our science ILAT teachers, are offering workshops for students to do over the summer. Some of them are through UVM, which is a natural resource management academy. The deadline is to June 15th, but they offer students who are from 7th to 12th graders to work with experts in natural resource management. There's other ones like V-Teen for Science Pathways, as well as Youth Environmental Summit Seeking Workshop. Yeah. During the high school, during this last week, we had a prep rally to support all the sports team over the school year, celebrating track, football, or not football, soccer,
Football.
baseball. It's football in
With a U, with a U, yeah.
I think what's really cool about that is a student petitioned for this pep rally to happen. I remember she want to shout out to Kyla Dom. She went around asking for signatures like, I want to put this pep rally on. And she did it herself, worked with Lindsay again. Lindsay's been doing a lot with students. So she worked with Lindsay again, had students sign the petition, say, I want a pep rally. And we had the band play. Band doesn't get to play much for the school, so that was really nice. They had like some obstacle courses and like little fun games in the gym. Sophomores and the classes were split by color. You know, we're a small group, but it was pretty loud in there, and a lot of energy was in the room. So yeah, it was fun. This was last week. Yeah, whole week was led up to the pep rally on Friday, and like Lindsay said, Thursday was like teacher lookalike day. Wednesday was whiteout Wednesday. It was like a spirit week, along with the challenges for advisory. It was a good way to wrap up before June Po. A pie, yes, there was pie in the face with teachers too. Put names in these little cups and picked out a name, and teachers got pied in the face. Highlight of the week.
Always a classic.
We also had our senior walk that has been going on for 2 or 3 years, and this is just to inspire the elementary kids or anyone throughout the school, having our seniors walk through and pretty much give like an inspirational walk to show up. We also had the honors dinner as well as the senior dinner for that's hosted by VSAC, and they offered us little parting way gifts, some things to prep just for college, like bars of soap or towels that we can use. And currently now during Junpo week, seniors are presenting their senior speech. So this is their graduation speech. Kind of nerve-wracking for some of the seniors. This is their final. This is what Junpo has been providing support for since we started. So I have done it for like 3 years. This prepped me for now, and I passed my speech today.
All right.
And yours was on.
Information technology.
I got to see his rehearsal a week or two ago. It was very good.
We also had our award ceremony today to congratulate students on their achievements over the year. There's art awards, science awards, all subjects, music, like she said. Winner right here.
Hey.
Yeah. So I think tomorrow middle school has their high school move-up day. It's at 6 o'clock. Should be like kind of a celebration for all the middle school students moving up another step into their life. And for JFK students on Monday and Tuesday, there's 2 celebrations, all-school celebration on June 11th. And on June 12th, there was a 5th grade BBQ at 5 p.m. at the PAC. That's our student report for now.
Thank you very much.
Your last one.
Oops. I guess I missed that. Winooski High School graduation is Saturday at June 16th at 1 p.m. in the gym.
What time do seniors have to be there?
Oh. 12:30.
Early.
I would say Ms.
12:15,
Green is going to
yeah.
have you here early.
Miss Green is going to knock that into my head. Don't
Yes,
worry
she
about
will.
it.
And you'll be there for the rehearsal, the luncheon and the rehearsal on Friday, right?
Yes.
Great. Good.
Boy, don't let anybody off the hook in here.
It's tough.
All right. Well, thank you very much. So pretty much the balance of what we have, other than our review of our annual agenda, is some policy work. One is recommended, and I'm going to ask as we go through that one whether it's something that we want to take forward and move and put into our own policy stream. There's a new state required policy, and then 3 federally required policies. So without further ado there, first one is a recommended policy here, and a title listed so far, the transgender and gender nonconforming students.
I'd like to suggest that we absolutely have this policy.
I will lead in with
Anybody else?
Jen
Yeah.
made the same comment when she called earlier to tell me
Yeah.
that she wouldn't be able to be here tonight.
I agree.
Matt?
I don't think we need it.
Alex? Okay, so I think that piece is easy. This is done by the VSBA, is that the
Yes,
starting
the
point? that we have
policy
here?
that you had, because we don't have a local one, this is written by the VSBA, so it's got lots of footnotes in there with the proper language and supporting documents at the federal level, at the state level. I think it's a really good document. It gives really clear guidance on how to work with some potentially difficult issues for students and staff and families. And so I think it's an excellent policy and fully support you moving forward with
The
it.
state recommends policies, not require them very often. And in this case, why do they just have this as a recommended policy and not a required policy?
I don't know the reason for this one. Typically, they will make a required policy if it has legal references in it that must be followed that are not in other policies. So like discrimination, for example, we already have a policy of that which speaks to the protected categories that are in here. My guess would be that's why it's not a required.
Anything in this policy that we can't conform to when we adopt it? I believe we'd be doing everything there is in there already based on what I had seen.
Especially, I feel like the facilities, gender segregated facilities, making sure that it does, that students are able to use homes that
Mhm.
they did.
Right.
And I think the only thing that I've seen over time with the VSBA policies is the lead-in
Right.
piece is usually very dry and kind of tacky on the tongue, rather than
Tacky
having
on the
it
tongue,
being
that's
a
a
little
nice
bit,
phrase.
being a little bit more us, I think.
So like moving the second paragraph up,
Yeah, starting with that.
that kind of fits with more of
It-
the format that you follow.
Right, rather than jumping right in, or, believing that this is important to the Winooski School District believes that this, policy to provide safe, orderly, civil, whatever.
And then we
Just
could probably get a little even more,
to make-
because if we adopt this, then we're just gonna come back to us, right?
It'll be a
Yes.
3-year
Yeah, it'll be a 3-year.
adoption at that point.
I've always been inspired by, I'm wondering who always wrote the top pieces, because that's an infrastructure that stayed with us, right? We were like, wow, it's just a really lovely way to introduce it.
Right.
That we could think of some ways to introduce this one that, beyond providing, which is super important, but providing safe, orderly, civil, and positive learning environments for all students, regardless of perceived or actual sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, that there is some inherent dignity and worth. Like being able to speak to all people's inherent dignity and worth in this, because this is such.
The others.
Huh?
Because you're right, most of the others have
There's
that
like a little, yeah.
statement. It feels like us.
So there is an
So-
opportunity here for the board.
Exactly. That's what I was
Well,
thinking.
because
yeah.
this will not come back to you
Right.
until August or September for
Perfect.
the second read for approval. So if somebody wanted to try and work on that paragraph.
Yeah, I'd be glad to.
Right on.
Yeah. It deserves some special
It
attention.
does. I like that we can say it is us.
Yeah.
Anything in here that you might want to have adjusted
No.
to be?
No, there are some cross references that I need to go, because they don't have the typical, it's written in a little bit different way with the footnote format versus the cross-reference and the legal references. So I want to tighten that up a little bit and do a thorough review of our policies and procedures to see, because we do also cross-reference our procedures to see if there's anything that needs to be in there. And then I also wonder, July 1, there is a new H333, which has to do with single-user restrooms and whether or not that needs to be included or cross-referenced or footnoted somewhere.
Okay.
So I'll figure that out.
Okay. All right. So Tori, thank you for taking that piece. Appreciate that. And then the other one now, a required policy is student freedom of expression in school-sponsored media. Basically, I thought this was pretty well laid out in that it gave just a very few items that it can't be, and leaves open-ended, the rest to interpretation. So, Sean, did you have any?
No, the
Concerns with this
one
one?
that, in my experience, that you end up kind of dealing with the most is number 6, and it's not always crystal clear whether or not there is a substantial or material disruption of the ability of the school to perform its educational mission. And that's really, those are the questions like an administrator has to really ask themselves and ponder before they make a decision to kind of say to a student, you can't do this. And
I hate the word obscene. I think that is a
Yeah.
very tricky territory for anybody to define what that is. I always think of when I see that word, I always think about this Chief Justice or one of the senators who said, like, I can't tell you what what pornography is, but I can
Right,
tell you
the
what I
Larry
see.
Flint case,
So, obscene here, like, I would prefer that be crossed out because I think this gives way too much leeway for someone to define. There's no real definition for that. Whereas the other words I can see, like, threatening, intimidating, but obscene.
Let me ask the VSBA council about that, and maybe even Nicole Mace to see whether there was a very
Intentional
specific
reason.
reason to put that word in there and why.
And or can it be clarified?
And do they have a definition already?
Right.
Right.
Yes, that is one of those pieces. I mean, it does have a few definitions, but that may end up fitting into one of the categories that needs a definition. Okay, good. And I think that the header statement on this one seemed to be a whole lot better. It didn't stand out to me as being something to change too much. Do we have a lot of opportunities for student freedom of expression in school-sponsored media? Do we have much? I mean, there is a lot of media. All has an E in front of it for the most part, but I mean, are there other?
There are some, but
Forums?
not a ton. What do you guys think? Oh, excuse me.
Uh-oh.
Cramping up.
Yeah, they block a lot of the medias that we go on.
Coming in.
Like some that they block Snapchat. So, they used to block Facebook, and they block YouTube for some reason. So we don't really use it.
Okay. And then this would be like a school newspaper as well. Things where students write opinions or I guess arguably your presentations that you do a couple times a year, maybe one of those.
That depends on how public it is, because if it's within a classroom and kind of contained, then it wouldn't necessarily fall under this.
Okay.
This is really speaking to more broad environments.
All right.
That's one thing we were talking about with community conversations and sort of amplifying some of the amazing things around Junpo and demonstrations of personalized learning and meeting graduate expectations is having sort of a media folder of some of this work, some of the work that's being put together. And I don't know if this falls into that, but being able to have a media storage of some of the amazing work that's happening here, to be able to amplify it and show some of the work that's happening. I just wanted to just kind of trigger that conversation that we've had, that again, to share out some of the amazing work students are doing.
Yeah.
I don't know if that falls into that.
All right. So I think what I'm hearing, at least with the rest of this one, is it is pretty good the way it is. And we'll check with the obscene piece just to see if there's a way to rephrase, restate, or define more clearly.
Because otherwise it gives way too much freedom.
I think that's a good point, because if it ever comes back before the board and we have to try to find a way to define it, it's already been through the teacher, the principal, the superintendent, and it hasn't been resolved. So be worth doing that.
Well, it's with a lot of those, right? Gratuitously profane.
What is that?
Broad swath.
Yeah, one's person interpretation of gratuitous could be quite different than another's.
Yep. All right. So we'll see that one come back. So the last three I would ask, these last three are based on federal requirements for monies?
Right, so every year we have, the state comes in and they do a fiscal monitoring report specific to our federal grants that we receive. And they then send us a report, and almost always there's little things that we got to clean up here and there. And one of the things that they required us to do in this last monitoring visit was because some federal requirements have changed, so the feds are requiring at the state level that they can show evidence that the locals have these policies in place. So when I first got it, I pushed back on them, and we had a phone call about it, and I said, listen, this is a policy governance environment. We have policies like asset protection. We have policies like financial conditions and activities, and we sent them all to them and said, will this suffice? And on the conflict of interest, we have procedures around gifts and purchasing bids and quotations, and we have a board member conflict of interest. We have employee travel expense procedures, and that was one that was moved from policy to procedures when you went to policy governance 5 years ago. So, we have a lot of this very similar language and things in policy and procedures in different places. It didn't satisfy them. So the last thing that I want to do is start adding policy upon policy, because that's what you did 5 or 6 years ago,
Right.
was clean that all up.
We got 6 inches of it getting rid
But
of.
because of how reliant we are on federal monies, there isn't a lot of choice here.
That makes sense.
But then again, from a compliance standpoint, it's stuff we're already doing. So it's not like it's
Right.
going to create a whole bunch of extra work for anybody to be compliant with it. And we
No.
don't have a lot of latitude in changing it as well, because there's certain things you have to do.
And we've taken the policy language exactly from what the agency gave us in the fiscal monitoring report. And the things that are missing are the cross-references, which I've already started to write in, but I'll put those in for when you see it for a second read. Otherwise, I would just encourage you to, at the second read, approve them as is with the updated cross-references.
So the only comment that I found in here, and this is near and dear to my heart because I spend a lot of time on our travel website and I hate to when I do travel. But that is the travel reimbursement piece. Is the comment, the section is reimbursement will only be for those expenses that are reasonable and necessary for the activities of the district. I'll just stop there. I had the whole thing highlighted. The challenge here becomes the reasonable, the necessary we can easily justify. The reasonable ends up being the difference between the 5-star hotel and a Motel 6. Certainly don't want people staying in a rat hole, but one of the things that when it comes down to being comment about reasonable, is there any we've got people doing a lot of traveling to learn. I don't know how this fits necessarily. These are with federal dollars. This is travel with
Yeah,
federal
so this
dollars
is
on this one.
only, right.
Okay. Because the only comment I had put down here is some standard reimbursement rates. There's a couple of sites to, if you're traveling to Memphis, you would expect a hotel at $250 a night. If you're going to Anchorage, Alaska, it'll probably be $750 a night, but they're no different, right? It's just, cost of living things. And I didn't know if you've ever run into that or if it's even worth it to.
I haven't run
something-
into that.
Okay.
And our procedure on employee travel expenses, it doesn't speak to it numerically, giving any kind of ranges or anything like that.
I know it's
Yeah.
tougher to control and it's a lot of work if it's not built in somewhere, but just something to think about from a reason. If you've not run into a problem, then we probably don't have people doing
No, I don't
$1,200 a
think
night
so.
hotel rooms.
No,
Which
no, we asked questions about that.
I suspect it's there. People take care of it pretty well. So okay, good. I'll.
One question on the policy and prevention conflict of interest. And it's more of a procedure thing, and when we bring in new board members and something that, maybe it isn't, we have to read this, but it just seems something helpful to have that we all read again at the beginning of the year, just to remind ourselves that we're not allowed to accept anything that exceeds $100 in value to get us potentially in trouble. I'm thinking of Governor Scott right now with his, conflict of interest that's going on with that. But it's just healthy for us to read as part of our new board member kind of materials, or even just every August rereading it just so that we don't get into trouble.
Yep.
It is-
There is language in the board member code of conduct that you do annually, but I'm
Okay.
not sure that it states it that explicitly
Right.
in there.
And it just might be helpful to have it as part of that materials.
Good. Figured those would be easier to run through. All right, and then the last thing we had on the agenda in section 8 in the governance processes here is reviewing a draft of the annual agenda. So as we did for this year, the executive limitations from that we're reviewing with Sean, he's going to do all 8 again. We do the review and accept in the same cycle like we did the last time. I left ours in the half and half, so we do them over a 2-year period. Getting them in the first place, our interpretations and data and whether we're compliant or not, took us a while. They're done once. I'm gonna claim out loud that they're not done as well as they could be. But I think now that we've had them through one time, we have something on paper to start with. We can edit and update from there. I would like to suggest that we go through the half and half so we can have the time to spend to do them well. And then after this, maybe next year we start and we put them all in, because then they'll be where Sean is now and it's just an update each year. Hopefully not ever to the point where it's just a rubber stamp and we do a review on it to make sure we are in fact compliant if we say we are. So those are in there as we had them. As we go through those, for next year, I will get them out early and I'll be asking each of you. We can't do it as a Google Doc because then we got a meeting going on. But I can ask, Alex to help with one, Tori one, Jen one, and Matt. So you'll expect those as they come forward.
Talk about this. Is the date there?
This was the evaluation. Oh, the August potential. Okay, so the one bit of an oddity, and there's only one item in the month, is that it is in August. We had talked about skipping July, putting a retreat in September with the annual board meeting with the city, end up being kind of in the same week. But in August, there's a review, the facility evaluation and the capital project update. We thought that having that one item on the agenda for August would be worth our while, because we're going to get to the point we're going to have to start bringing this forward. So we want to make sure everybody's got a fresh view of what it is.
And what we do is we'd have the architects come. They're almost done with their on-site evaluation, and they'll be writing the report. And they'll have a full report with cost estimates. And in addition to that, then they would go over and get, Alex and Mike have been a part of the committee, but getting the rest of the board up to speed with that whole process. Where the drawings are, what the next steps are, and everything else.
And so we had a couple of dates in here, the 15th or the 22nd. I believe those were both Wednesdays, right?
Mm-hmm.
To try to nail one of those 2 dates down.
Right.
I know we're getting 22nd, we're getting close to school again.
Yeah.
So I just didn't know if anybody had that.
That's the night before the barbecue.
around 15th, but I am the 22nd.
Okay. Alex?
Nothing planned at this moment.
Okay. So do you want to nail down the 22nd at this
Yeah.
point and put that in there so we can
Thank you.
nail that down? I just put it in here because my physical brain doesn't work nearly as well as my electronic one.
Same start time, Mike?
I would say we do the same
Yeah,
6:30.
Okay. And then the Saturday.
And that'll be the only thing on the agenda that night. That is it.
There could be
Yeah.
a little business depending on.
Well, yeah, I was
what's
going to say
on.
there may be a
Since we are all in the room.
Yeah.
stray piece.
While you're here.
Since you're here. Cinches.
Whoops.
And then September 15th, the Saturday is our retreat.
Correct.
Yes, and then Monday night it ends up being is the meeting with the city. So we're gonna end up not Wednesday that week, but
Oh, right,
it'll go
'cause we'll
right
have
to
a ci-
Monday.
there'll be a
because
little bit on
the
their
city,
schedule, okay.
yep, the city is, we're on their meeting this time.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent.
Hold please.
What time does the joint meeting start with the city? Same time?
They start at 6.
They start at
Six,
6.
okay.
Oh, God, I asked.
And two. Strolling in. Casual. Hey, what's
Yeah,
up,
how you guys
everybody?
doing?
We'll have our dance routine ready. Stroll in.
Tapper side.
I'm working on the Winooski dance.
I just, I was gonna go down my story about my ballroom dancing experience, but I'm not going there tonight. So, yeah, that's a good story someday though, but not
All
tonight.
right, good. We'll hear it another time.
That's a way to leave a cliffhanger for all our viewers for next week,
Next week,
next month.
All right.
ballroom dancing for Mike.
I don't think there's anything left in here that really changed a ton. So I don't know if anybody had a chance to get I think the annual agenda has gotten us to the point where we can put together the agendas, we can gather the information ahead of time, and
Another sustainable structure that keeps us on target.
yep. The only other note that I had here then is on the focus on learning. The cultural presentations, we had talked about getting various groups in to have the discussions about, you know, what our different cultures are struggling with, or what they're here with, and what good things they need help with and whatnot. So we had talked about actually doing like 5 or 6, right?
Yeah, so
Broke down well.
what we've talked about is having our cultural liaisons each have a meeting where they would do the focus on learning, and they would come, and they've done these presentations with our staff. And we cycle them through every 2 or 3 years so that everybody gets to hear them. And they kind of talk about their own story, you know, and where they came from and how they got here. And then they do some pieces on language and customs and kind of acculturation into the United States, into Vermont and Winooski, and the things that families from their specific culture need and what they're struggling with, and the beautiful things that they bring that we could all learn from as well.
That's awesome.
So one of the other, I think, discussions we had is opening that focus on learning up to the community to see if we wanted to have
Cool.
other folks come in and you know, learn with us. So
That'd be an exciting topic that I think.
touch points, we can do the newsletter, we can do the,
crowd.
you know, front porch forum, and just to invite the community in. All right. Then down to community engagement. Do you guys want to take 3 minutes to clue us in as to where your community conversations have been?
Yeah, we've had a few more, and we're just still putting in data. I think we're about to move into the new phase of starting to write a narrative story, not just a data story like we gave you on the students, but also start trying to take some weekly intentionality time to start putting together narratives about our pride points and strengths and points of improvement. And we still have plenty more conversations, hopefully, to be had.
Yes. Yeah. No, if you're wondering, like, what's the theme and the narrative,
No,
I think.
just how you're doing with getting it
Yeah.
together, and in general, if anything has surprised you, I guess.
Nothing that surprises me, but when I think about the general theme, like, it's about reputation, about Winooski, and for some reason, The Greatest Showman's in my head, and This Is Me, the song there, just describes Winooski to me, and I think it's something that we have a lot to be proud of. And one of the things that I wanted to add, I did go to the presentations of the hurricane videos yesterday, spent an hour and a half watching those videos, and it's impressive work for what the as an end project on there. And it's one of those things that I think the hardest part is that like it's like a hidden secret, and we gotta find ways to pop that out, and I think it will also give students a better understanding about the authenticity of their work, because right now it's only teachers, and you know how it is. Kids don't really listen to teachers and like parents, right? But if we bring some outside community members to bring some real authenticity, the one that I went, because I like asking questions, I asked questions, and I think it helped probe a little bit, but you kind of wish they would be better at it, but they didn't know the seriousness. And I think that's where we're trying to really find that intersection between community and school, and I think that's what we've been finding out a lot in our findings and just the themes. I think the other thing that we just need to work on is really find the intentionality of finding, be frank, non-whites to be part of our community engagements. And so this is where I'm looking to, because you're non-white and stuff, but there's ways that we can encourage your parents to come out and be part of our conversations. Please tell us how we should do it. It's one of those things where we're begging for your expertise at this level.
Good. Anything else?
So I did notice the message from Ann Linton saying we have to submit
Oh,
for the.
yes, the newsletter. Yes.
I don't know whose turn it is. I'm bringing this up because I fear it might be my turn. Not fear that it might be my turn. Anticipating. So we had talked about generating ideas or writing prompts for that.
Yes.
First of all, is it my turn?
Exactly.
I don't know.
Hold
I know I
please.
wrote June's.
Right, it might be, I don't know.
I'm happy to do it.
I don't know why I don't have where the schedule is.
We have,
Great, then it's yours.
Okay.
Just kidding.
I'm a team player, Tori.
Aren't you too?
I actually had Matt following Alex, and then Tori and then I.
Okay, so I've got July. I got next month. I'm on it, because hopefully we'll have had some time to,
Yeah.
perfect, okay.
Okay, because
So
that kind of sets
topics?
yours up then with the work you guys are doing, and just
Exactly.
elaborate a little bit. and-
Perfect.
okay.
Right on.
For this, do we have anything in a summary for the capital project to even paragraph or two for? Is there anything that would be worth bringing now, or is it just worth waiting?
I think it's worth waiting until the facility evaluation is done to tie that together. I mean, it's not going to be anything new,
Right.
because really all we've been doing is kind of going through iterations of the drawings and
Right.
paring things down.
And you had a pretty elaborate rendition of what's going on in March?
Yeah,
April?
March or April. I think it was April.
April,
actually,
because we
yeah.
didn't want to do it, tie it into
Right.
the vote.
Right.
Okay.
Just a thank you to the teachers.
Oh yeah. Hey.
It's just a nice little, I mean, we've seen
Yeah.
a lot on the work, and I think in some ways, I think the teachers would probably just be an appreciative note that we see them.
Right on.
And the whole staff, I think,
And
too.
sorry,
Yeah.
teachers
Yeah.
and staff.
Yeah.
Just to say that, like, we're not always evident, but we see the work, and we know the challenges, but we're really appreciative of them. Because last month I wrote a thank you, a letter to the students, essentially saying, like, congrats on the students and moving on. And I think this would just be a nice, probably transition, just to say, hey, we see you.
Love it.
Thank
I'll
you.
do that.
Yep, and for those moving on, good luck, and those coming in, because we got all the contracts and pretty well set, so.
And Michael verbalized that on Friday, too, at the luncheon,
Right.
at the staff luncheon, too.
That's
So it'd be
good.
nice to have it in both places, I think.
Great. Cool. Thank you.
All right, give you enough to go on?
Yeah.
All right, just kick you over the edge and you're good to go, right? All right.
Just a little prompt.
See, sometimes all you gotta do is kick. Everything else happens. All right. So just upcoming dates, or first, anything for the next agenda? Again, we're now looking, August is set with a one item plus anything that comes up. September is the MOU pretty much, and our meeting with the city. We're gonna meet somewhere down in City Hall at that point as well. We'll meet with them for a short time, and then we'll finish our business somewhere down there. They got a closet for us to finish up in. And then the retreat on that previous Saturday. So any agenda items, topics, thoughts? Okay. The last student day Friday, graduation on Saturday, and then our August meeting on we just decided the 22nd, back to school barbecue on the 23rd. Our retreat, September 15th, the joint meeting on the 17th, and then that is our regular board meeting, so. A few upcoming events, but a summer to think about where we are.
Right on.
So, awesome. Anything else? I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any other discussion?
Good luck, Alex.
Yes. Good luck.
Yeah, congratulations.
All those in favor? Aye?
gonna say nay just because I want a nay for the year.
We'll go
Squeeze
three,
one
And I
one.
don't want us to, and I
Alex
don't
wanted-
want us to
Keep
leave.
talking.
Alex wanted to stay.
I wanted to stay. There's
All right.
one nay.
Duly documented.